Dear Rabbi, Shalom, thank you for taking the time. We're here on this 9th of June 2014, Yud Aleph Sivan, to conduct this interview for my program Profiles of Faith with Rabbi Avi Weiss, famous rabbi, inspiring teacher, renowned scholar and author, and above all, a visionary advocate and activist for the Jewish people. You like that?
Above all, a father and a grandfather,
Well,
a brother, a son.
Yeah, that's true. Rabbi, how do you prefer to be addressed?
Avi.
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 Thank you, Rabbi Avi. My theme starts with the transmission of our tradition and the changes that have occurred in the last 100 years. Today, with a generation of Zaydis gone and with others too busy, how do you see the transmission of the old tradition in the modern Orthodox world?
Well, first I think that there are Zaydis and there are Bavis, and thank God they interact beautifully with, many do, with their children and with their grandchildren.
Did you have a Zaydi or a Bube?
I'm actually named for my mother's father, Avram Chaim Yosef, so by the time I was born he was gone, and my father's father, David Weiss, lived apparently in my bedroom for a while. I have a brother, Mordechai, who's almost my age. We're a year apart, but I have very vague memories of him. He died when I was 5-6 years old. On the Bubby side, my grandmother on my father's side, I was a very young boy. I remember my Shendel Rivka, my mother's mother, who died when I was about 13, a very pious woman. I have wonderful memories of her, of her piety, of her goodness, sitting and reciting Tehillim. I have memories, though, of other wonderful people who were Zaydi figures. When I was younger, believe it or not, I went to Haredi schools. I went to Torah V'das. There was one older man, Reb Chaim Gelb. I have great memories of him. I have memories of the way he used to say, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach. He would scream out Amen so loud that sometimes, in the sweetest way, the rabbis at Torah V'das would reprimand him, and I have memories of his putting his head in his hand and crying. The Rebbe had reprimanded him. Standing out on Tompkins Avenue in the freezing cold, he would have a charity box in his hand, and he was known to collect pennies and nickels. I wasn't impacted by my biological Zaydis in a profound way. I was too young, but I had other Zaydis who had a great influence on my life.
We should share Zaydis. A Zaydi sharing program.
Correct.
Who are the people who affected you when you were a child?
I was most affected by my parents. My mother was, as Shlomo Carlebach would say, she was sweet as honey. She was the sweetest, kindest, most wonderful person. And my father affected me very much. My father taught me to stand up for principles no matter how unpopular. That piece of my life, I'm indebted to my father. One of the classic stories about my father that I love telling is that when my parents lived in Netanya, when my mother was alive, this goes back many years, in Yibadeh L'Chaim, my father is 95, and thank God. So my holy task was to pick them up at the airport. And he calls and he says he's coming in on a Wednesday morning. I said, Abba, you know how much I love you. It's just difficult for me to change the schedule. Abba says to me, Mommy's not feeling so well. We'd really appreciate if you could pick us up at the airport. I say, Abba, you know how much I love you. You know how much I love Mommy. It's difficult. And there's a pause in the phone, and my father says to me, Avrami, don't love me so much, just pick me up at the airport. That's a very big message, that love is an emotion, but love is in the details, love is in the action. That trust, that commitment, and those are the stories and those are the narratives that I think all of us, around the world, Am Yisrael, that we're impacted upon the most. There's a great power when you're a Zaydi. I think that grandfathers, let me speak as a grandfather, to my grandchildren, I'm Sabi Avi, not Saba, I'm Sabi Avi. And with my grandchildren, I can try to fix the mistakes the many mistakes I made when our children grew up. And one of those mistakes was, in my rabbinate, I had no boundaries. I was so driven. And oft times, it was my children who lost out in the process of my drivenness to be there for Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael and Torat Yisrael. I told you a story about Dina and about Dov, and our middle child is Ilana. Ilana is living in Israel with her husband Michael, and Dina's married to Mark, and Ilana has 9 children, 2 of them in the army. I remember once taking our Dinala when she was a little girl. Now she's a mother of 4 children, a great paper cut artist. And she was a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I was driving. And in those days, I drove like a meshugana. As driven as I was as a rabbi, that's how crazy I drove. And my mind is, of course, on 100 different things, because I thought the whole world was dependent upon me, narishkeit. And I'm thinking about different things, and she's babbling and saying something to me. And suddenly she says, "Rabbi." I pull the car over. I say, "Dinala, I'm your Abba, I'm your father. Why'd you call me Rabbi?" And she said to me something I've never forgotten. She said, "Abba, I've been saying Abba, Abba, Abba over and over. I got no response. I said, Rabbi." I got an immediate response. So I think one of the great ways of transmission is that we as parents and grandparents, we have to do better. Not so much in speaking to our children, Yisrael, but in listening to them. It's much, much simpler to speak, to talk, than it is to listen. The first step, I think, in transmission is, before we talk, is to listen to where our children and grandchildren are at.
So you're saying, actually, davar v'hipucho, the best way to transmit values is to listen
Yes.
to people.
The key is to listen.
To transmit, you have to receive.
To transmit, you have to receive. It's chanoch lanar al pi darko. I want to learn. I want to understand where this child is at. And no 2 children are the same.
You're talking about the active mode of transmitting values and messages. But I'm talking about the indirect transmission by seeing a Zaidi at the Bet Midrash, by sitting a Zaidi singing and at the dinner table, by seeing a Zaidi believe with blind faith and accept everything. These are things that I know as a grandfather and others, we're too critical. Everything has to make sense. And our Zaydis knew, because they loved this, it must be right.
I think you're correct. I think the best way to transmit is not through the word, but through the action. To my rabbinic students, I would say, the best of our Torah that you can give is not the words that you say, but the way you carry yourself and you conduct yourself. And the same is true with our children. Children and grandchildren are very, very smart. We may think that we're fooling them, but they can't be fooled. They see everything. And children are most taken by the actions of parents and grandparents. And by the way, young people very often, they're not sure of themselves. They're in doubt about whether they really have the stuff to make a difference. It's seeing a grandparent who not only expresses and lives great love of God and love of Torah. I think it's the role of grandparents to express unconditional love to their grandchildren. Unconditional. I want my grandchildren to know that I believe in them, that God believes in them, and they can grow up and they can make an extraordinary contribution to Am Yisrael, to the people of Israel, and to Kol Yoshvei Tevel, to the whole world.
You said before that your grandchildren grounded you, made you more focused on them. Did it change your role as an activist?
And I wouldn't say it changed my role as an activist, but being with children and with one's family does not have to take away from being driven. 25 years ago, when Waldheim, who was an ex-Nazi, He was the head of the United Nations, and then he became the president of Austria. And I made a promise with Beate Klarsfeld, who's a great Christian Nazi hunter, that wherever he would appear in the free world, we would be there to protest. And he was being received in June of 1987 by then Pope John Paul II. And I said I had to go. I made a promise. And with Beata, we were there. We raised the voice of moral conscience, of Jewish conscience. There was one problem. The day of the arrival was my son's graduation from elementary school. So I sat down with my son Dov, who to me means just the world. He's really a very special, tender, sensitive boy. He was then going to Breuer's, believe it or not. I sat with him and I said, you know, Dovi, you know what's going on with Waldheim. I may have to miss your graduation. What do you think? And he said to me, Abba, if you have that responsibility, I understand it. You must go. And I went. A couple of years ago, 5, 6 years ago. I'm always talking to Dov. As we grow older, we're closer than ever. He reminded me that I wasn't at his elementary school graduation. I said, Dov, we sat down, we spoke about this. You said that it's okay if I go. And Dov looked at me and he said, Abba, I was 13 years old. I'm sorry that I was protesting against that maneuver on that night. My place was to be at my son's graduation. I'm driven by 2 words, Avat Yisrael, the love of the Jewish people. But in those days I had no boundaries, and I've learned those boundaries. When Ilana was married, it was right then that Rabbi Meir Kahana was assassinated. And Meir had in his pocket a note, I was told by the police, that said that he believed that certain people were in danger and could be killed. And I was at the top of that list. And before I could turn around, the New York City police insisted that I have 24/7 police protection. And after about a week or 2, I finally convinced Tom Lowe, strong, big, strapping person, let me be, I'm fine. He leaves our home in Riverdale. And as he leaves, I look at the porch and there's something bulbous in an envelope. And I said to my dear wife, Toby, I said, Toby, there's something very funny here. It's not a letter. And Toby says, don't touch it. Who knows what it is? We call the police. Police come and they see what it is. It was a simulated grenade. And inside it said, Kahana is dead. You're next. Before I could turn around, there were 30, 40 top New York City police in the living room. And Ilana, the Kala, walks in. My Ilana, whom I love so. And she walks in, she's to be a Kala. She puts her head in her hands and she says, Abba, I love you so much, but I can't wait for the chasana. I can't wait for the moment when I can leave. You should know that at her wedding, this is the price you pay. At her wedding, it was ringed with cups. And that's the price you sometimes pay when you take these kinds of stands. And I'm proud of having taken those stands, but it took an enormous, enormous price.
Rabbi Avi, tell us please, how do you remember yourself as a child, and when do you remember yourself feeling God independently for the first time?
Those are deep questions. You know, when I was a very young child in Tervadas, I didn't feel really any independence. I did what I was told to do, and that was the atmosphere.
Your path of discovery, how did you discover your God?
I think it was post high school. It was after my RJJ days. In RJJ, I majored in basketball. That's all I did. Played ball with, on my team was Shelley Silva, who's the Speaker of the Assembly. In fact, I think on one radio show, he was on a radio show, and I called up and I said, Shelley, this is number 22, number 44, never passed me the ball. And there were only 2 people in the world who understood what we were talking about. But, you know, with great love for all my Rabbeim, I think the way it was transmitted to me was sometimes a little too harsh. Das ist the memes. Kach haemet. It was too strong. too strong. And at least for me, my soul needed something different. I needed something softer, I needed something sweeter. I remember the first time I saw Shlomo Carlebach. It was in a hotel and candles on the stage, and Shlomo walked in. I was mesmerized. My soul was looking for this message, for this sweetness. I used to memorize in my head his nigunim, Nimkomcha Malkeinu, on those long records. Even at a very young age, Shlomo touched me. I was very affected by Rabbi Moshe Wolfson. That was the one Rebbe who's still alive, may it be for many more years, in Borough Park. He was my 5th grade Rebbe. He taught me with love. I think that's the gateway. But in terms of your question, it was after high school that I went to Yeshivat Keren B'Yavne. I was more out on my own that I began to search. And I'm proud to say that that search continues to this very, very day.
Did you have doubts?
There were often times that I had doubts. Yes, I did. I think my most profound doubts occurred. We have 3 children. 2 are married, so we now have 5 children. Because we consider our sons-in-law our sons. But between our second and third, between Yazdini, Ilan, and Dov, we had another child, Yitzhak Raphael, who was born with a very serious genetic disease and who lived into the 4th month. And that was a great spiritual challenge to me. I was then a rabbi in Monsey, New York, and I struggled. And I'm very grateful to many people around me who helped me through many, many months of struggling with God, of wondering why.
You're angry?
I don't know if I'd say angry, but I was struggling. I was struggling in a deep way. But Yisrael, I came out of it, in my particular case, much stronger. But it taught me as a rabbi to really appreciate and understand others who may be in such a struggle, and not to judge them, not to chas v'shalom condemn them. One of the cornerstones of my rabbinate is I welcome everyone with open arms, and I'm absolutely non-judgmental. I remember being once at a seminar where a senior rabbi to me said, publicly, he said, Avi, you're so non-judgmental that for you there is no such thing as a tzaddik or a rasha. And I respectfully responded, and this is a cornerstone of my belief, I said, I'm sure there is such a thing as a tzaddik and a rasha. I'll let HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'll let God decide who's a tzaddik or a rasha. I'm not going to make those decisions.
So you came from a stark background, and yet it doesn't sound like you loved it, beside the basketball part of this, and yet you didn't leave it, you actually embraced it, you went deep in. Why? Why didn't you just run away?
Well, because there were many other influences. Bnei Akiva was a very, very strong influence. My experience in Eretz Yisrael, in Keren B'Yavne, was a very strong influence. The moment after my first week of learning with my chavruta, Menachem Weininger, and waking up one day and he's in a soldier's uniform crossing the field, I said, Menachem, we're supposed to learn together. That's the first time I was exposed to the concept of the Hester Yeshiva, to a person who was going to put his life on the line to defend Am Yisrael. That impacted upon me, and in a profound, profound way.
They say that people don't fight for values, they fight for one another. So what was closer for you, God or your chavruta?
Well, I have emunah pshuta. I have a very profound belief in God. Although, as I said, I sit in judgment of no one, and everyone is welcome, whether you believe, you're an agnostic, you're an atheist, everyone is welcome. I have profound belief in God, but it's often the case that the gateway to understanding God could be through people. There are Rishonim who talk about how the gateway, Israel, to reaching up, to feeling God's presence, is reaching in. To connect, as Rav Kook would say, to the inner divinity, the inner divine spark that we have within ourselves. And once one moves inward to connect to that inner soul, a light is switched on. It's like a fire which has been ignited, and that instantly connects, of course, to the Godhead above. The Rishonim would talk about, how am I to talk and understand the God above without first understanding the God that is within me? Ultimately, of course, it's the absolute one. It's a monotheistic concept.
See, you're touching exactly into my next question. I'm interested in what touches your Jewish soul. What brings out the Avat Hashem over the Yirat Hashem? Can you share with us some of your sense of love of God, and how can one love God who is so omnipotent?
Well, there's so many different aspects. For me, Shabbat is a gateway to understanding and feeling the presence of God. For me, sitting down and studying Torah, sitting over a Gemara, that's a gateway to feeling the presence of God. For me, sitting in front of a class and teaching and learning from my students is that gateway as well to feeling the presence of God. It's too often the case that you can walk into a synagogue and be there for 2-3 hours and you don't feel God. You don't hear God's name in a deep, deep way. Something's terribly wrong if that's the case. You could be in a Bet Midrash where you really don't feel God. And the challenge has to be to feel that presence. It's all a gateway to feeling the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
It sounds like you grew up with some Jewish support in your Yiddishkeit.
I grew up with great Jewish support. I grew up in a Haredi school, but in a very religious Zionist world. It was sort of like conflictual in that I go to Haredi yeshivot. My parents are religious Zionists, and there were many other outer influences. Bnei Akiva would certainly, but in my home there was a song, there was a spirit. I was in my father's choir at the age of 3 or 4 years old. I felt deeply the neshama of what Judaism is all about.
So you grew up with a lot of support in Yiddishkeit.
Yes, I did.
But many Jewish kids don't have good role models in their Judaism. They don't understand the value of their Jewish soul. They're drifting. What do you tell someone who is in doubt, who is not had that support? How do you bridge the gap?
Well, of course, I do believe in my travels in America, what I have found is that young and old people are searching. There are all kinds of statistics out there, surveys, that conclude that people are not searching. I profoundly disagree. I travel to many campuses, many communities. I find people are searching. They're searching for meaning, they're searching for purpose, they're searching for God. They are searching. It may be right beneath the surface, but they're searching. What we're missing, and this is what I've devoted myself to, what we're missing are the role models, the rabbis, the teachers who can light that fire. That's what we're missing. In our community, in the modern Orthodox and the open, inclusive community, we have got to create a new culture, and it's the Chabad culture. And that culture is the highest honor is to serve Am Yisrael. The highest honor is to be a Rav B'Yisrael. And that's why we created Chovevei Torah. That's why Yeshivat Marat was created, so that we could place all around America, all around the world, the best men and the best women who are spiritual leaders who teach the message of Judaism. If we have those connectors, it can make the whole difference.
This is great, but it's a little bit shooting above my question. Let me make it simple. You're going to Corner Cafe in the neighborhood where I see you many times, and there is an Israeli guy moving, Moshe Movies or something, and he's sitting and he starts conversation with you, and you start talking. You have about 5 to 10 minutes. You know that he's a typical Israeli who came to New York to discover himself. And what do you say to him? What do you do?
Well, when I sit with the Moshes, my goal is not to say anything profound. My goal is not to speak from the above to the below, because maybe he's above me. It's in all probability he is. But to connect, neshama to neshama. As I said before, to listen to where Moshe is at, to connect, and to connect in such a way where I want to engage him, develop a relationship, invite him to the shul. I don't call the shul a shul, I call it a bayit, a home. Come into my home. Come in, let's learn together, let's pray together. Invite him to my home.
That's a good stuff. I would like this, if somebody did it to me or to my kids or to anybody, to welcome them in.
Look, in the bayit, if you came to the
not
shul,
judgmental
if you came to the shul, there are many striking features of the Bet Knesset. One of the features is the rabbi doesn't sit in front of the shul. I don't sit in front of the shul because that's not where the Jews are. I sit amongst the people. I sit amongst the people. Every aliyah, I'm somewhere else. I want to be the first to the door to greet people. I want to be standing at the door. I stand at the door, hug every man who leaves. My wife, Toby, hugs every woman who leaves. And it's real. It's genuine.
Connecting, interacting.
That's what it's about. When I walk through the streets in Riverdale, I don't consider my domain as rabbi to be in the shul. When I'm walking through the streets, if I see people,
you hug and kiss everybody.
That's correct. I want to be there for them. Yes.
Rabbi, if you don't mind, let's go to another
Sure.
side. Rabbi, you started your rabbinic career in the 1970s, where you founded this shul in an oil boiler room.
Right.
Together with other Jewish leaders, you marched and fought to free Soviet Jewry. You protested the de-Judaization of the Holocaust and its desecration when they tried to build a monastery in Auschwitz. Later, you founded Yeshivat Chovevei and are active in integrating women in the halachic process by creating Yeshivat Ma'arat. You founded Amcha, the Coalition for Jewish Concerns. Any one of these accomplishments could be the work of a lifetime, but you never stop. Who are you, Rabbi Weiss? Where do you get all this energy? What drives you?
You know, what I'm driven by is I love my people. If somebody were to ask me what my rabbinate was all about, I would say two words. It's about Avat Yisrael. It's the unqualified love of all Jews. From the right, even the people on the right who are my biggest critics, I welcome them with open arms. I would welcome the opportunity to interact with them.
But you could do it being a rabbi of a shul. You can be a pulpit rabbi and
Because
change
it's
the world from the pulpit.
Because it's Avat Yisrael. You know, in the end, you're right, those are just words, and you have to pick me up at the airport. You got to be real. So in 1994, for example, when I saw that the Amiyah, the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires, was bombed, it was the largest attack on the Jewish community in the Galut since the Shoah in the Galut. I just felt I had to go. And Toby said, my wife says to me, you don't speak Spanish, you've never been to Buenos Aires. I felt I had to go. And I'll tell you why. For me, the best model of nation is family. If I want to understand what my responsibility is to Am Yisrael, I have a simple exercise. When I come to the word, the people of Israel, or the nation of Israel, I substitute a word for nation or people, and that word is my family. And so I asked myself a question. If this was a family member, would I go or would I not go? And the answer to that question is, I would go. And that, in the end, when all is said and done, that is what inspires me.
So you're running to put off fires. Every time there's a fire somewhere, or you conceive this to be a fire, you feel there's an emergency, I'm going to run to put off that fire.
That's a piece of it. That's a reaction. I'm reacting. But of course, a piece of this is that ultimately what endures is that which is proactive. You're not just putting out fires, you're doing something positively and proactively and teaching Torah and doing all of that. Look, in the end, as much as I'd like to think that I take second place to no one when it comes to fighting anti-Semitism, I've done my share. That is not the key challenge that is facing Am Yisrael. The key challenge that is facing Am Yisrael is not the body of the Jewish people that is in trouble, it's the soul. And if I am a Jew only to defend Am Yisrael, that's reactive Judaism. That's reactive Judaism, and nothing reactive is going to endure. You've got to turn reactive Judaism into proactive Judaism. Judaism is going to endure if people get a sense of what the mission of Torah is, what the message of Torah is. That too is something I feel within me, the need to spread this message to all of Am Yisrael.
So this helps me understand you. In your younger years, you were reactive, and then by building Yeshivat Chovevei Ma'arat, you're now proactive.
Well, I wouldn't put it in such blocks. When I was doing reactive stuff, I was still a teacher. I was teaching at Stern College. The joke was that many of my classes were held at the Soviet mission to the United Nations, and parents used to call me and say, we're thinking of sending our daughter to Stern College, which is the sister school of university, but we heard that you conduct your classes at the Soviet mission. I said, no. I don't conduct my classes. I live at the Soviet mission. So, but it's not that when we stood up for Eretz Yisrael and did all kinds of things that I wasn't teaching. For me, really, the base, the foundation, is the spiritual base. Even then. But now, certainly after I suffered, I've suffered 2 heart attacks at demonstrations. After that, I said to myself, listen, I really have to completely devote myself to the spirituality piece. I thought it would be less pressure, but in a certain sense, there's even more because
it's different.
It's different.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, about those new institutions, and you are still a pulpit rabbi, so the question is, why not settle on the existing canon of Jewish practice? Why do we need new institutions or new concept like open orthodoxy? Are you a rabbi, are you a rebel, or both?
Well, I'm a student of Torah, and the Torah talks about 2 dimensions. The Torah speaks about Sha'al avicha v'yagedcha, zekenecha v'yomru lach. It talks about we have a tradition, we have a past, we have a history, and so it's very, very important to seek out that past. And throughout America, throughout the world, I find people are looking for that sense of history and rootedness. But in the same breath, the Torah says, Ki palei mimcha davar, when something is too wondrous in your generation, v'kamta v'alita el hashofet asheyeh bayamim hahem. The Torah talks about a delicate balance between past and between a present which takes us into the future. That's what halakha is about. That's what the Torah is all about. So the true student of Torah is a student of the past, but a student whose eyes are open to the future. Some of the greatest Rabbanim, whom you would not suspect to be rebels, were rebels. A name that comes to mind is the Chafetz Chaim. When the Chafetz Chaim in the early 20th century introduced the idea that women should study Torah on a sophisticated level, he was condemned. Rav Kook was condemned.
You're condemned. You're in good company.
Well, I'm in good. There's no comparison. These are the greats of the greats. But in my small way, I recognize that, when you make a difference in this world, by definition, there's going to be a pushback. I remember when I left St. Louis, my first pulpit, I was there for a year. As I'm leaving, they have a going away party, and a friend of mine on the board, I thought he was an old man. He was about 40. I was 24. He gets up and he says, Rabbi, I make a toast to l'chaim. God should bless you. You should have many enemies. I walk up to him afterwards. I say, Saul Mirowitz, a blessed man. I say, Saul, you're my friend. What are you blessing me with enemies? He looks at me and he says, Rabbi, I'll tell you something. A person who goes through life without having any enemies is a person who hasn't done anything. By definition, if you're going to want to make a difference, you're going to have enemies. I meant it in the most positive way. Years later, I became, for 10 years, I served as Jonathan Pollard's rabbi, and he was in Marion, the toughest prison in the country. So I used to come through St. Louis. I called Saul up. This goes back years. I say, Saul, I've got to see you. So we come, sit for coffee. The first thing I said, I put my hand on Saul's hand. I said, Saul, I want to tell you, I fulfilled your blessing 100%. That's it. Leadership by definition involves it's change.
But you skipped one thing in your narrative here. You talk about Imi Palem Imcha Davar, and you went and you asked the shofet, the judge of the time, the rabbi of the time, the leader of the time, why didn't you just go and ask? From that to creating new venues, was there nobody to go and ask?
Well, I do ask. What I felt was missing in those years was I felt that the modern orthodoxy that I had grown up with had moved to the right, had precipitously moved to the right. And I felt that it was necessary that modern orthodoxy, as I grew up in the late 60s with Rav Yoshe Soloveitchik, that it be reinvigorated. And that is what really led to the creation of Chovevei Torah. Chovevei Torah started as a reaction, but as I said before, if Chovevei Torah or Yeshivat Marat, if they remain a reaction, they will not endure. They're no longer reactions. They have proactive missions, proactive core values. And I'll tell you something, in the politics of the modern Orthodox community, we could not have succeeded unless we identified a need. We identified a very important need for Haraya. There are 100 rabbis, almost 100 rabbis in the field, who are in synagogues, who are in schools, who are in chaplaincies, heads of schools, hillels, and we have a lot to be thankful for. Chovevei Torah next year is going to be at the largest number of students we've ever had, and the same thing with Yeshivat Marat. The largest number of students will be in the women's school.
The Jewish world is still going to the right, further to the right.
I don't believe that. I believe that there is no doubt that there is a piece of the Jewish world that is going to the right. But as it relates to orthodoxy today, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that orthodoxy is stronger than ever. But the bad news is that for probably 85% of Jews in America, orthodoxy is irrelevant. What do you mean by it's going to the right? I'm looking at the whole. For me, it's the whole of Am Yisrael that I look at. And when I look at the whole of Am Yisrael, I don't see that happening. I see the whole of Am Yisrael. I see the whole of Am Yisrael searching. The average Jew in America is searching for something that is rooted, traditional, it's deep, as long as it's not stagnant. And the flip side is they're looking for something that's open, but as long as it has parameters. And that's why the message of an orthodoxy which is open and inclusive and non-judgmental resonates. People want orthodoxy today, but they don't want an orthodoxy that's rigid. Orthodoxy doesn't have to be rigid. I'm fervently orthodox. I believe in Torah min hashamayim and in the meticulous process of halakha, but rigidity doesn't mean that women can't have rights. It doesn't mean that women can't serve as spiritual leaders. It doesn't mean that women can't, indeed, they must be educated quantitatively and qualitatively on the same level. I could be engaged in religious struggle. I can welcome all Jews and learn from all Jews, regardless of whatever their preference, whatever their observance, whatever their sexual preferences. They're all Jews, they're all welcome.
With great assimilation and major changes in the life around us, you propose some changes. You're motivated, no doubt, by enhancing the future of Jewish life. Yet you are attacked from both directions. Those who want more change to attract the secularized Jews claim that you're not doing enough. And those who don't want any change claim that history taught us that such changes cause a lot of harm. What is the golden path and how do you balance those legitimate concerns?
Well, first, one has to be honest with oneself and with one's understanding of Torah, what I'm teaching, and halakha. I don't really pay that much attention to what others are thinking. You try to do the right thing and move forward. I mean, it is true that one has to be very, very much in tune with where the community is. But if you're a leader, be true to yourself, teach what you believe is correct, teach the proper values, and everything else will fall into place. This is not only true with what's happening now. When we started the Soviet Jewry movement, there was tremendous criticism.
You're saving Jews then, but now we're talking about we have thousands of years of experience, and unfortunately, in the name of saving Jews, some people took Judaism and Jews with them, and you know our history. Shabtai is not far away, and other wrong prophets, and they cause damage in the name of doing good. So how do you navigate? You can make a law to make something easier or better or simpler, and yet there is Rabbi who I spoke to, says the art of unintended consequences.
Look, the way one handles this is each issue has to be assessed on its merits, and as it relates to halacha, for example, there's a halachic process. One has to consider legal precedent, one has to consider prior binding law, one has to consider situations, conditions, one has to consider dracher darchei noam. I mean, this is as far from Shabtai Tzvi as I am from the Pope.
Right. But they say that when asked Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, the Zecher Tzadik Levracha, about certain things, if you should write it, he said, if I write it, they won't take me seriously. Well, there's a danger sometimes on you know.
You're talking about one of the greats. For somebody who was afraid to write, there's no one who was more prolific.
No, not about the books, but I think Makkah, like he made with the milk, he made.
I think when one is in leadership, one does have to tread carefully, but one has to move forward, and one has to move forward with strength, but with humility to be open to other voices, to thoughts that others may have on what you're doing. And that's precisely what I think we've done.
So I'll ask something that is closer to you. We always hear rabbis teach us to dig deeper, to do more. The inevitable theme is always doing more. Can a person not have a good relationship with God without doing more?
Because I think our covenantal relationship with God, the brit with God, is that we're trying to move ultimately l'taken olam b'malchut shakai. We're trying to make this world a better world and redeem the world, and that means we've got to move forward. Standing still is not enough. If you're standing still, you're moving backwards.
On the art of the covenant, tell us a little bit more about how you see the covenant in Tikkun Olam.
Well, the covenant brit is my contract with God, and God has responsibilities to us, and we have responsibilities to God. And the ultimate goal is v'shamru derech Hashem lasot tzedakah u'mishpat. That's what it's all about. I see halacha as a means of v'shamru derech Hashem, to do tzedakah u'mishpat.
And it's an active everyday life.
It's active and every day, yes. Every day I have to ask myself, have I done a little bit more to bring about that ultimate goal of geula, of redemption?
Speaking of geula, I have a quick one. How do you see Mashiach and Olam Haba? What is your visual, your vision?
Well, Olam Haba is different than Mashiach. Olam Haba is the afterlife. I mean, all human beings are created with neshama. The neshama is eternal. That's Olam Haba. In very, very, in a skeleton form, if I could use that expression. But Mashiachiyut, I think the Rambam's position that the only difference between the world now and Yemot HaMashiach is Shibud Malchiot. It's going to be a world at peace. It's going to be a world that we're not going to see what we're seeing every day in the world. It's going to be a world where the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, for the larger world, the fundamental principles are going to be followed. And that's the role that we have. We have a deep, deep responsibility to bring about that.
What will bring Mashiach?
Every individual, well, first, here I'm talking to myself and letting everyone listen. What will bring the Mashiach is that each of us has to do our share to make this world a better world, and I believe that Torah and Halacha, that's the blueprint.
So I have a suggestion. Since I told you I want to do a Zmira, why not do it with the guitar and have your grandkids come? But until they come, which we'll do that. Can you sing the Zmira from Beit Abba, something meaningful?
Well, the greatest nigun was Sheila Malot it's above a nigun. El Harim. Kids, come on in. Me'ayin yavo ezri Ezri me'im Hashem Hosei shamayim va'aretz Al yiten lamot raglecha Yanum shomrechem Hine lo yanum hine lo yanum Velo yishan velo Hine lo yanum velo yishan Shome Yisrael Hine lo yanum velo yishan Shome Taya, come over here. Taya. Come over here, welcome, come on in. Hashem Shomrecha. Taya, you know it, don't you?
Yeah.
Hashem Tzilcha. Al Yad Yeminecha. Where's Shira Dinale? Hashem Shomrecha. Shira,
Yes.
come over here, please. Hashem Tzilcha Al Yad Yeminecha Yomam Yomam Hashem Lo Yakeka Ve'yareach balayla bam bam para Yomam They got it. Taya, come over here. Taya, Shira,
Yes.
Yisrael has some questions for you.
For me?
Yes, good.
Can you share with us what are the most memorable images that you remember growing up with the Zayde around here?
Rosh Hashanah at their house and Yom Kippur. I have a story. You want to start?
Please.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I don't know if Avi remembers this, but
Saviyavi.
yeah.
Safti.
One time I was walking with my cousin who's my age, but now he lives in Israel. And we were walking in the street, and we crossed the street, and there was this man. He looked like a little bit homeless. And me and my Sabi Avi starts walking up to him, and me and my cousin are like, "What are you doing? Like, oh my gosh! Like, this man's like, he did not look like safe. I don't know how to explain it." And my grandfather walked up, gave him a hug, and just like emptied his wallet and gave it to him. And me and my cousin were standing there like, "Oh my god!" And like, I don't think I understood then, but like now, like, that's pretty amazing. Like, I don't know if I'd ever feel comfortable doing that, and like, I don't even think the money was that impactful. The fact that he gave this man a hug, like he'd never met him before, he'd never been exposed to him before, he just gave him a hug to try to make him feel better. Like, I thought that was incredible.
So how many hugs do you think your Savi Avi gave until now in his life?
There's no number. It's
probably some insanely large number, like.
Taya, where are you? Come over here.
So you want to tell us a story about Savi Avi?
I don't know if I remember a story.
Anything that comes to your mind. Free association.
Their shul is very special. It's very different. There's people from like every walk of life there. Like, you'll always meet someone interesting and cool. And Sabi Avi is friends with all of them. And at the end of shul, or whenever shul's over, we always go home, and Sabi comes like 2 hours later because he stays to talk and hug every person. That's something special.
And yeah, about Taya's niggin. How does it go?
Oh yeah, he wrote me a name. I have it on my phone.
How does it go?
It's like Tali, 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 Yakirli. That's like the song.
Do you think that your Savi Avi, when he hugs, does he give more or does he get more?
I think it's like, it's equal. It's like mutual. Like,
So do you think that the message is get as much as you give? It's like electricity, you know, it's like a balance, a
Yeah.
science of hugging.
Yeah, they
It's
know
like
Sabi's there
we-
for them, and Sabi gets the fulfillment that he's there for all these people. That's what makes him happy, is being there for all these people.
I don't know, when I hug, I just feel it, I hug myself. When I hug somebody, I get back. It's like it's
It's
as
nothing
close.
as meaningful as giving, there's no doubt. Tov,
The mirror.
you have a second?
You got married at 19.
Well, he was 19, I was 20. truth be told.
This coming year?
You're, you're
Next week, it's 50 years.
50 years. And if we had limited amount of time, which we don't, and you can tell us only one or two things that stand out in your mind, what are the things that you would share with us as the most important things?
My husband's love of people. My husband is totally pained when other people are in pain, whether they're sick or sad or have problems. It just goes right to his heart. And that's why at age 42 he had a heart attack.
Feeling everybody.
Feeling everyone's pain and enjoying everyone's happiness.
He told me it cost his family a little bit.
Well, he wasn't home all that much. He was out visiting constantly the hospitals and nursing homes, and his activism, he was away a lot.
And he gives you the credit for everything.
I didn't really have a choice. The story around town is that when he wanted to go to Argentina,
You asked him why.
I asked him when, and he said, I'm thinking of going. I said, what time? He said, what time's your flight? And he said, 7 o'clock. So I kind of know him. After about 10, 15, 20 years, I got the picture that he has to go. And I spoke to his doctor once, and I said to him, tell him not to go so much after his heart attack and open heart surgery. I said, tell him not to go so much. It's not healthy. And he said to me, he became a very good friend of ours. He said, I think it'll cause him more stress if I tell him not to go.
It's true.
He'll be more stressed.
So you also hear a lot of criticism around,
Right.
but because he is taking courageous stands. How does it affect you?
Honestly,
Yeah.
I don't read it. I don't read any newspapers or any articles, nothing on the internet. It's enough that I know that he reads it and it's upsetting. I don't read it. I just chose to live in
If
my head in the
somebody
sand.
who is critical who was listening, what would you tell them?
That they don't understand my husband.
But they would say that they understand your husband, but his ways may harm Judaism in some form.
No, it's not going to. It's going to do the opposite. It's going to bring more people in.
So how would you explain it? You're going to be his missionary, his agent.
I would say you don't understand. You only know your little Dalit Amot. You know exactly your little area. But there are people who don't understand anything about Judaism, and his openness brings them in. Our whole shul are Baalei Tshuva. Our whole shul are people who really come from very little Jewish background, and they've really embraced the whole idea of Yiddishkeit because of him.
Are you involved in the Maharat, in Yeshivat Maharat?
No.
So even though you are his Eshet Chayil and it's all about involving women, it
I'm
doesn't
not
come
involved.
to you?
Well, I'm involved in the shul more. A lot of company on every Shabbos for the last 50 years, a lot of company. But I myself worked for many years, so I just retired. So that's the story.
Thank you so much.